Hello everyone, in today's video we are doing a decklist update for my Swordsoul deck. Um, I do believe this is season 27 of Master Duel, so do be looking out for that when you consider the card choices, but getting straight into it, we have Tingy Spirited Hara as the first card of our main deck. This is a level 1 Worm Tuner, so when we combine this with our other monsters, this is going to let us get into our Synchro monsters. So Idhara plus our level 4 monsters is going to get us Denglong. Idhara plus our level 6 Longwan is going to get us into Yazi. And then Idhara plus our level 7 Tingies is going to get us into our level 8 Synchros. So that's going to be Boxia, Draco Berserker, and Chi Zhao. Then Idhara's other use is that when we control a non-effect monster and we have banished wire monsters, we can banish this card and add one of those banished wire monsters back into our hand. So this is going to allow us to get more extenders, and this is going to help us win the grind game against our opponents. So this is a really powerful card in a lot of hands, and we're going to be running this card at 3. Our next card is Maxi. This is essential for the Maxi minigame. I'm not going to say too much about those cards. Next up is Jiao2, Darkness of the Yangzing. This is a level 2 wire monster. We use this as part of our Denglong engine to help us get into our level 10 synchros when we combine this with Boxia. And then this is going to allow us to do our light and dark synchro combo for Chaofeng. So this is just a really important piece of our Denglong engine. Next up is Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring. She is also a part of the Maxi minigame, so I'm not going to say too much about her. She does help boost our deck by being a level 3 tuner as well, so that is her other use. Next up is Swanee, Fire of the Yangzing. This is a level 4 Yangzing monster, so this is going to fit right into our deck because our deck uses a lot of level 4s for our synchro monsters. So this is going to fit in our Denglong engine for that. And then this also has the fire attribute, so this is going to help us get into our Chaofeng with a light, not light, but yeah, no, actually a light and fire lock, actually, yeah. So this is for those. Next up is Tingy Spirits Mapura. This is just our essential level 4 Tingy monster. You can run either Mapura or Sthana. Sthana is for making Monk a more offensive card because Monk by itself doesn't have a whole lot of use. And Mapura is for protecting your non-effect monsters. So Mapura is going to protect our Swordsoul tokens, our Mirror tokens, Sarsara tokens, and it can protect Monk as well. And then whenever your opponent gives you a Nib token, it can protect that as well. So I find this card has a very broad range in this deck, so I like Mapura over Sthana personally. Next up though is Moyi. She is a core part of our Swordsoul engine. Generally most turns will be dedicated to resolving this card. She can reveal a wire monster or Swordsoul card in her hand and special summon a Swordsoul token, which is a level 4 Worm Tuner monster, and it has the Wire Watcher attribute. While you can show this token, you can't special summon monsters from the extra deck other than Synchro monsters, so this is going to lock us out of our Link monster part of the extra deck. But usually we try to get rid of these tokens as quickly as possible, so not going to dwell on those too much. Next part of Mo Yi is that when she is used for a synchro summon, she can draw us a card from our deck. So this is going to help us dig into either more engine to extend our combos, or just more non-engine to help us disrupt our opponent's plays. But definitely a really powerful card for our card advantage. Definitely run her at 3. Next up is Taya. He has the effect of banishing a Swordsoul card or wire monster from our graveyard. So this is going to allow us to use our Swordsoul spells and trap effects whenever those cards get banished. So he is definitely a bit more of a powerful extender than Moyi is, but he just requires a bit more of a setup since you have to have a card in your graveyard. And then his other effect allows him to send either a Swordsoul card or a Water Monster from our deck to the graveyard when he is used for a Synchro Summon. So this is going to allow us to make even more extending plays off of this card. So definitely a powerful card. Going to run him at 2. Next up is Ecclesia the Virtuous. She is a very solid going second tool because whenever our opponent controls more monsters than we do, we can special summon her from our hand, and then she is a level 4 tuner, so she can be half of our synchro plays as well, so definitely a really powerful tool. Then she has the quick effect, she can tribute herself and special summon a Swordsoul from our deck, so this is going to help boost the consistency of our Swordsoul monsters in the deck essentially. So Moyi goes from 3 copies to 6 copies, and Taya goes from 2 to 5. So we definitely run her at 3. Next up is Swordsoul Strategist Longwon. He is generally how we're going to get into our level 10 synchros. He can send either a Swordsoul card from our hand or a Water Monster to the graveyard and special summon himself and generate a Swordsoul token. Then his other effect is when he is used for a Synchro Summon, he can do 1200 burn damage to our opponents. So this card is going to help us OTK as well. So definitely a really powerful tool in the deck that we love to run as many copies of as possible. So 3. Next up is Mare. This is a really strong extender in the deck, but he just requires a lot of setup. So we are running him at 1. He is a tuner, so that he is at level 7, but he has the effect of being able to reduce his level by 1 and special summon a Mare token, which is a level 1 water monster. So he can do this up to 3 times per turn, making him a level 4 monster, so he will be a level 4 tuner instead. So this is a really powerful extender because once he's on the board, he can generate up to 3 more monsters. So definitely a powerful tool in the deck. Next up is Vishita. This is one of our powerful going second tools. What he does is when you summon this card, not summon this card, but while you control a non-effect monster, you can banish this card, target one card your opponent controls, and return it to the hand. So generally speaking, most of the time, not Denglong, but Vishita is going to interact with something your opponent controls, so that is why he is a really strong going second tool, because he is going to help with our card advantage and through the exchange of effects with our opponents. So definitely a powerful tool, and we run him at 2. Next up is Ashina. This is definitely our most powerful Tinyu monster. He allows us to special summon a Tinyu monster from our deck whenever we control a non-effect monster. So this is going to help us with extending our combos and getting into more Tinyus from our deck. He essentially lets us be having more copies of those Tinyus. So Vishita kind of goes from 2 to 5. Adhara goes from 3 to 6. And Mopura goes from 1 to 4. So definitely a really strong card. We run him at a solid 3. Our next card is Nibiru, the Primal Being. This is a really powerful hand trap that goes into decks that special summon a lot. Other than that, he is a really good cross-out target because this is one of those decks that special summons a lot. So definitely be looking out for that. Our next card is Arch-Nemesis Protoss. He requires a bit of setup to summon, so we run him at 1, but he is a really strong tool for playing against dark decks, because going first, when you summon him out, usually we call dark, so dark decks won't be able to special summon those monsters without attributes. And then in other kinds of duels, when you special summon this out going second, or we just still have this on our field, we can declare another attribute and then destroy all monsters on the field with that attribute. So this is going to be a really strong OTK tool as well. So definitely a really powerful card, but we only run him at 1. Getting into our spells and traps, first up is Vessel for the Dragon Cycle. This allows us to Foolish one Water monster from our deck to the graveyard, and then if we control a non-effect monster, we can add one Teeny monster from our deck to our hand with a different name than the Scent monster. So when we combine this with our Teenies, we can do a lot of 2-card combos that will let us get either 2, 2, 3 synchro monsters. And then going second, this is a really strong card because it allows us to generate or get 2 teeny monsters into rotation, and our teeny monsters are our going second tools because we want to use those cards to interact with our opponent's boards before we get into our core engine, which is our Swordsoul monsters. So this is a really powerful card. It just requires a lot of setup and it's not super searchable, so we are running this card at 1. You can run this card at 2, but you really don't want to see too many copies of this in any given hand. Next up is Swordsoul Emergence. This is a really powerful consistency tool. What this does is it allows us to add one Swordsoul monster to our deck from our hand. No, to our hand from our deck, and then if we control a synchro monster, we can just have added any one wire monster instead. This is going to allow us to increase the consistency of our Swordsoul monsters. So Mogi goes from 3 copies to now 9. Taya goes from 2 to 8, and Long One is going to go from 3 to 6. Really powerful card. We go second and our opponent controls a monster. We can search out Tile with this card to get into Yazi. So essentially this card turns into a 1-card combo that is going to let us get into our entire engine. So this is a really strong card. Next up is Swordsoul Summit. This is essentially searchable monster reborn because this allows us to reborn any wire monster from our graveyard to our field while we control a synchro monster. So this is going to be a really strong extender as well as a strong OTK tool. So definitely run at least one of this card. Next up is Cosmic Cyclone. This is kind of my tech card for the current meta. So there's a lot of really strong Labyrinth and Snake Eyes going around. So this is to kind of counter those decks. And then within this deck, it can banish Blackout from your field so that you can generate a token. So it is good in its own right in this deck. Next up is Called by the Grave. This is a counter for a lot of hand traps, so this is a part of our maxi minigame. We run this at a 2. Crossout Designator kind of is the same thing, except for this is a counter specifically for the hand traps we run in this deck. So definitely a really strong card as well. Definitely still for the maxi minigame though. Next up is Heavenly Dragon Circle. This is a card that requires cost, but this is going to be very beneficial either way. So what this does is it tributes a wire monster and searches a wire monster from our deck. And so when we use this with our Sword Souls, we can play around targeting effects like Imperm and Valor so that we can still resolve those Sword Soul effects. And then when we combine this with our Chingies, we can essentially search out any wire monster from our deck to our hand. Then when we tribute a non-effect monster, you can special summon the card that you added instead. So this is going to allow us to tribute things like Mug to special summon really any wire monster from my deck that can be. Protos and Mirror have summoning restrictions, so we're not going to be able to summon those cards, but being able to special summon any other worm is still really powerful. The effects will be negated, but we are still going to use this card as essentially a part of our combos in that kind of way. And then for those duels that kind of extend into later turns, while we control a non-effect monster, you can banish this card from your graveyard and add a teeny monster from your deck to your hand. So this is going to help you get into your teeny engine. So this is a really powerful powerful tool in the deck, we are running this at a solid 2, just because you never really want to see too many copies of this card in your hand. Next up is Infinite Impermanence. This is just a really powerful hand trap that seconds as another target for a crossout. Swordsoul Blackout is a really powerful part of our Swordsoul engine. What this does is it allows us to target one arm control and 2 cards our opponent controls and destroy them. So when we combine this with our Qing, this is going to allow us to trigger Qing's effect to protect itself from being destroyed by card effect and by banishing a card. And since a card was banished, that will allow us to activate our other effective Qing to banish a card from our opponent's field and graveyard. So this is a really powerful card when we combine it with our Swordsoul engine. And then we can combine it with the rest of our cards. Obviously, this can pay our Moyi and Longwan cost. We can banish this from the graveyard for our Taya cost, and then since this card was banished, it can activate its other effect, which is to special summon a Swordsoul token. So we can use this effect from our graveyard with Taya. We can use this from our graveyard with Qizhao as well, but Qizhao can also banish this from our hand and our deck. So with this card is really strong in combination with Qizhao. But you know, definitely run this card at least as a 1-of in your deck. Next up is 9 Pillars of the Yangzing. This is a searchable Omni Negate that is part of our Denglong engine. You don't really have to run this card, but this card is going to allow us to make a lot of our inboards stronger whenever we control a Yangzing monster. So this is a really powerful tool because it is not only a Omni Negate, but by being a counter trap, that means that a lot of our opponent's effects aren't going to be able to respond to this, since the only thing that has the spell speed required to respond to a counter trap is another counter trap. So that is going to wrap up our main deck. Alright, finally getting into our extra deck, we have Denglong, who I need to do a lot of talking about. First of all, this card is a level 5 synchro monster, so there are only a few ways of summoning this card out in the deck. The first of being with Idhara and one of the mini plethora of level 4 monsters we have in the deck, and then the other way being with Mare and one of its tokens. Now, depending on the method we use to summon out Denglong, depends on what we go into it with from there. Denglong's first effect is if this card is special summoned, you can add a Yangzing card from your deck to your hand. Usually we want to add 9 pillars off of this effect so that we can hopefully make our inboards a little stronger. But if we need more engine in our hand, then we will usually add Swanee to our hand. What Swanee does is it can act as a normal summon for our combos, or it can be there for either Moyi or a long one cost. Usually speaking, the goal of Denglong is to use it to summon out a level 8 monster, so we can summon out Jiao 2 after that, but there are situations where we summon out level 10s with this card. Say if we had Longwan in our hand, we can either add to our hand Longwan cost with Denglong, so we would probably in this scenario want to add a Jiao 2 to our hand instead of Swanee, and then we can special summon Longwan, and we can use Longwan plus Denglong to make a level 10. And in order to do this, we're going to need to use Denglong's second effect to send a level 4 monster from our deck to the graveyard, and then Denglong's level will become the Scent monster's level, so Denglong will become a level 4 tuner. And we can use Denglong and Longwan to make a level 10 synchro, and we can activate Denglong's last effect from when it leaves the field to special summon a Yangzing monster from the deck. So this can be Swanee, and this will allow us to get into a level 10 synchro and a level 8 synchro using the Swanee and the Swordsoul token from our Longwan. But as I was saying before, whenever we summon out this card, depending on the summoning method, it's going to depend on what we want to send to the graveyard with it. So when we usually make this card with Idhara in a level 4 monster, we are usually going to send another level 4 monster to our graveyard. So, for example, in the hand we have right here, this hand makes a Denglong with Ashina and Adhara. We special summon Ashina, Link for Monk, and then we can special summon Adhara from our hand, and we can use Ashina's effect while it's in the graveyard to special summon Mapura from our deck, and then we can use Mapura and Adhara to make Denglong. And from here, you would add 9 pillars to your hand with a Denglong's effect on summon, and you can use Denglong's effect to send a level 4 to the graveyard. Usually, we want to get our Sword Souls into rotation, so if Taya wasn't in our hand, we would send Taya to the graveyard, but since we have Taya in this hand, we would send Mo Yi to the graveyard instead. And then since we have a level 4 normal summon in our hand, we didn't need to add Swanee to our hand, so Taya will be our level 4 normal summon, and we can use Taya plus Denglong to go into our Boxia. Now, why would we use this method of going into Boxia rather than just using our Tinnies to make Boxia with Vishida and Adhara? Well, for one, this makes sure that Boxia can always be chain block, so even if our normal summon was Swanee, Denglong would always chain block our Boxia. So whenever we're going second and we need Boxia to bounce something from our opponent's field, but we don't want Boxia to get chained into and negated, we would use this method. Then the other reason why we do this is so that Boxia always has follow-up. Remember, we just got Mo Yi into rotation, so we can now use Boxia as follow-up or as an extender to bring that Mo Yi out. What does this do for Taya? This frees up our Taya Sin so that it can be literally anything. It can be either Vish, so we can have more ways to have removal for our opponent's boards. It can be a long one. Remember, since we made Boxia with Denglong and Taya, we didn't need to activate Taya's effect. So we can send long one and then banish it and recycle it with Adhara. Or say we didn't have enough engine in our hand already, we're just going to save the Adhara effect to add back the Ashina. We can send either Mare, so we can have this into rotation, or like I said before, we would just send Vishida to have more removal. Having that Taya send freed up allows our Taya to be more flexible on how we approach our opponent's boards. We could also just send Blackout, so that when we bring Taya back out with Boxia, we can just banish Blackout and have an additional token to either just play around another negate or play around some sort of removal for our tokens. But remember, we also have Mapura in rotation, so our tokens should be protected from targeting effects. But let's go back to Denglong, because there is more than one way of going into this card. Remember, we can also make this card with Mare. As I was saying before, we can use Emergence as a 1-card combo in the deck, so we can use Taya off of Emergence, summon out Yazi, and then Yazi can summon out Mare. And that is part of the 1-card combo I was discussing about earlier with Emergence. So what Mare does is it generates those 3 tokens, decreases its level, and then we can use one of those tokens to make Denglong. So we'll still have 2 more tokens on our field, but we'll have Denglong as well. Because Denglong can level modulate, it can use one of those tokens to still get into a level 8 synchro by sending a level 7 monster from our deck to the graveyard. So this is either going to be Ashina or this is going to be Vishida. Ashina is just to either get it into rotation or to use as an extender, and then Vishida as, once again to have more removal. Taya on Synchro Summon for the Yazi should pretty much send Mo Yi here to the graveyard, so that is in rotation for the Boxia, because we're not sending it into rotation off of the Denglong, because you could do the inverse. You could do Denglong send either Mo Yi and then Taya send Ashina, or you could do Taya Sin Moyi and Denglong Sin Ashina. It depends on how you want to just approach making your field, because Denglong is still going to need to get into Boxia. So if you had that Ashina effect not already used, you could use it while you control the Mirror tokens to summon out Rapora, and Rapora can combine with the Denglong to make Boxia. But generally speaking, I like to send the Ashina into rotation off of the Denglong and Moyi off of the Taya. But as I was saying before, Denglong plus whatever can get you into Boxia, and then Boxia can do 2 bounces just because Boxia had 2 Warren monsters on its summon, and Denlong's last effect will activate, which is to summon out a Yangxing from our deck to our field. Like I was saying before, usually this wants to be Jiaotu, or we can bridge into Jiaotu off of Swanee by popping it with Boxy's effect, bringing back the Moyi from the graveyard, and then the Yangxing effect off of Swanee will activate, summoning out Jiaotu from the deck. So we can use Boxia and the Jiaotu to get into a level 10 synchro. This method allows you to get into an additional way to get into level 10 synchros that doesn't warm lock you as well. So this is a really powerful way of getting into your level 10 monsters. I will say that if you did the combo we discussed earlier, you will be warm locked. So the one with Ashina and Ethara, but that is something for you to look out in your own duels. That does pretty much cover how Denglong is used in the deck. I will also mention that the second effect, to send a water monster to the graveyard, is a part of the cost, so this means that this is not an ashable effect, and even if Denglong is negated while on the field, this effect can still resolve. The only thing that won't happen is that Denlong's level won't change. So what you would want to do in a scenario like this, say we summoned out Denglong with the hand we had here, is what we would do is we would probably send either Vishida or Merrimer to the graveyard. Vishida, just because having Vishida in rotation means that we can have some form of removal, as always, but we can send Merrimer to the graveyard as an additional extender that we can bring out with Shaman. Since Merrimer can only be special summoned off of the effect of a water monster, this means it can only be special summoned with Yazi or Shaman in the deck. So that is a little bit unfortunate. It would be awesome if we could special summon it off of things like Summit and Circle, regardless of the negated effects. It would be just an excellent way of getting it onto your field, but it has that very, very strong restriction on it. But regardless, we're using this as an awesome extender. As I was saying earlier, using this card to make Denglong while we control those mirror tokens. We can get into Synchro 8s using the Mirror token and Denglong from our level 17s. So that makes Mirror still a really strong card. I do think that pretty much wraps up everything I want to say about this card. The goal of this card is to give us additional ways to get into Synchro 8s and Synchro 10s in the deck that allows us to pretty much free up our Swordsoul engine and still get into more of our Swordsoul engine. So this is a really, really powerful extender. You just have to kind of be aware of when and how you should go into it. That does kind of I think that ends our discussion. So we're going to get into the rest of our extra deck. Next up is Yazi. This card is an extra deck monster that allows us to have a form of removal as well as an extender. So what this card does is that it cannot be targeted, but it can target a Yangxing monster you control and a card your opponent controls and destroy both of them. So it can destroy itself and a card your opponent controls. Then, if this card is destroyed by a battle or card effect and sent to your graveyard, you can special summon one water monster from your deck to your field. So this is going to allow us to destroy itself and then activate this effect on another chain. which can act as an extender. So this is a really good card. It just being a level 7 means that we won't always go into it, as there's just like Denglong, there's really only 2 ways to get into this card. So either off of Taya and a Swordsoul spell in your graveyard, or with Ithara and Longwon. Next up is Boxia of the Brightness, not Boxia Brightness of the Yang Zing, my bad. But yeah, no, this is another form of removal and extender in the deck. This card can target one level 4 or lower monster in your graveyard and special summon that card. It only just requires you to target one card you control and destroy that monster as cost. This is a pretty dope extender. I love this card. This is probably my favorite card in the entire extra deck. Ignore the royal, sauce. But yeah, no, this is a really strong board breaker. You being able to remove not monsters but cards from the field up to the original attributes of some modern monsters used for the summon of this card. Usually Moyi would only have one attribute to summon this card with, but when we combine Denglong into the summon of this card, we can pretty much always have 2 attributes for the summon of this card. So Denglong just has the uncanny ability of making all the Yang Zings in the deck stronger. But yeah, no, this is a really awesome card. Next up is Draco Berserker of the Tinyi. When your opponent activates a monster effect, you can quick effect banish that monster. This is just a weird activation restriction. It's when your opponent activates the effect and it's not a trigger effect. It's weird to explain, but you'll see. Just use the card. What makes this card good in the deck is that it is a level 8 Worm Tuner, so you can, not Worm Tuner, but a level 8 Worm Synchro monster, so you can summon this out even when you are Worm locked by Ashina. And then this card is really good in the battle phase, because whenever it destroys an effect monster by battle, it can make a second attack during that battle, and it also gains the original attack of that first monster it destroyed. So this is really good for destroying tower monsters, and it's really good for OT King because it can get really big really quickly. Next up is Chijiao, the card you're probably going to be summoning out the most in the deck. It has the effect on Synchro Summon. It can add one Synchro Summon, not one Synchro Summon, it can add one Swordsoul card from your deck to the hand, or it can banish it. So, as I said before, it can banish Blackout, and this is just a really powerful extender because it can search Emergence, and Emergence can search any Worm monster from your deck. Other than that, though, it also has a quick effect negate while it's on the field. It can do this once per turn, so this is a really good piece for your inboards. It does have the cost of having to banish a Swordsoul card or Worm monster from your hand or your graveyard, but let's be honest, you'll almost always have at least one Worm monster in your hand or in your graveyard. So really good tool in the deck. Next up is Chaofeng, our only level 9 Synchro. This is a floodgate on legs. We use Denglong to summon this out to lock pretty much at any attribute that we want. It just depends on what Yang Zing monsters we are using in our main deck. Its other effect is that when this card is destroyed by battle or card effect, we can add one tuner from our deck to our hand. So usually if we need more disruption, we'll add Ash Blossom, or if we need follow-up, we will add Ecclesia the Virtuous instead. Its last effect doesn't come up too often, but whenever you destroy a monster your opponent controls by battle or by card effect, you can special summon one Worm monster with a matching attribute to that monster from your deck. So this does have some pretty handy effects on it. Baron de Floor is a really powerful level 10 synchro monster that you can see in any deck that can synchro summon 10s, but she has a target destroy effect, and she has a omni negate effect once while face up on the field. So really powerful card. Her last effect allows her to special summon a level 9 or lower monster from your graveyard during either player's standby phase, and then you can return her to the deck so that you can essentially recycle this card and special summon it out again later. Really good card, honestly. We also use this target effect, the target destroy effect, going first so that we can destroy Yazi, and we can use Yazi's effect to go into Denglong, and we can do combos that make really powerful inboards, either just with a bunch of synchro monsters or with Chow-Fang on a attribute locks. So really good, really essential card for this deck. Next up is Chingying, Big Boy Chungus. We kind of went over its effect earlier, but whenever a card is banished, you can then activate this card's effect to banish one card from your opponent's field and graveyard. This is the only non-targeting removal effect in the game, so not in the game, but in this deck. So this card is also really essential. This is going to help you get over cards like Crusadia Avramax that cannot be targeted by monster effects, I think. It actually might be card effects. You can't target it with card effects at all. But because this is non-target removal, this is going to help us counter cards like those. Then this card's first effect is a kind of a passive effect. So for each banished card, this card gains 100 attack and defense, and then your opponent's cards lose 100 attack and defense. So this card can also get really big. It can close the distance between monsters bigger than itself really quickly as well. So this is another really strong OTK tool as well. Next up is Swordsoul Sinister Sovereign, Kijing Long Wan. Really awesome card, I'm not gonna lie. This card states that once per turn, if you synchro summon another Wand monster while this card is on the field, you can draw a card. So like Muyi, this is going to allow us to dig into our deck for either more engine or non-engine. It just depends on luck of the draw, but yeah, the heart of the cards be with you. Its next effect is what's really awesome about it. So whenever your opponent special summons a monster, once per turn, you can banish that monster and then do 1200 damage to your opponent. Also, whenever they activate a spell or trap, you can do the same thing. So essentially, you can burn your opponent for up to 2400 damage per turn with this card. This card is also just going to allow you to OTK really quickly. So really good part of the deck. Any games that may come to time are really going to rely on this card. Next up is Monk of the Tingy, our first link monster. This is just a core part of our Tingies. This can help make our Tingies effects live. So there's not too much to say about this card. I don't know. The effect on it was so good, they forgot to print it. I can't say too much about Monk. Shaman of the Tingy is a card that is either going to be used as an extender or as recovery because it can special summon monsters from the graveyard. The only thing about it is that you have to discard as cost, and then you cannot activate the effects of monsters special summoned from the extra deck except for Tingy monsters. This is a bit of a weird restriction, just because we can play around it. The cards special summoned from the graveyard can still activate their effects, even if they're extra deck monsters. So cards like Boxia can still be used as an extender. Chizhao can still be used as a negate. It really depends on what you summon. But either way, this is a really powerful tool in the deck. She also has the effect of whenever we declare an attack with a non-effect monster, we can target one card our opponent controls and destroy it. So she is another really powerful tool for removal as well. Next up is our last card, Tingy Spirit Sarge Rara. You usually won't go into this card. This card is essentially the flex part of the deck, meaning you can replace this card with whatever you feel like you want to run. It just depends on the meta. I feel like this card fits right into the deck just because it is a Worm monster, so we can summon it even if we're Worm locked by Ashina. and it's just a very solid tool going into a lot of decks because of its effect. Its passive effect, I mean, so that whenever we control a non-effect monster, our opponent cannot target our effect monsters with monster effects. So this is a really powerful tool for protecting our boards. Usually we make this whenever just we have the option of link summoning and we have mirror. So like I was saying before, if Denglong on the field is negated and we want to still go into a different extender, we can send mirror to the graveyard. We will link summon into Shaman using Denglong and probably Monk, and Denglong's effect will activate while it's in the graveyard to summon out a Swanee from our deck. We can then use Shaman's effect to discard a card and special summon Mirror from our graveyard. Then we can use Mirror's effect to summon out some tokens, and then we can link summon into Sarsrara. Use which monsters you feel like are necessary. If you just need to end on a non-effect monster, you leave one Mirror token. But usually you want to use Mirror and Swanee to get into a level 8 synchro. So this is either going to be Chijao for the negate on your opponent's turn, or it's going to be Draco Berserker, since even though you activate a Shaman's effect, it being a 10E monster means that you can still use its effect. And then Sarswara, also being a 10E monster, means that you can copy the well, you can use its second effect, which is to target one monster your opponent controls and summon a 10E token, which will have an attack matching that monster's original attack. So, not a monster we really go into too often, but it can be a really good OTK tool, since you can use those tokens to go into battle and just target a monster that has matching attack to it and essentially crash and get rid of both of those monsters. But I would say replace this card with whatever you feel is necessary. That is going to wrap up our deck in total. Last thing I do want to say about the deck is that I would recommend running a list over 40 cards. 40 is to maintain consistency. The extra cards are for your garnets. These are not cards you want to consider for your consistency, so this is going to be the cards used in our Denglong engine. These are cards you don't really want to see in your hands, so this is going to be Swanee, Jiaotu, Mirror, and 9 Pillars. Those 4 cards go on top of our 40 list, so we are at a list of 44 cards. If you have any other questions or comments and concerns, you can let me know in the comment section and I will try to get to you eventually. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like, and if you want to see more videos in the future, subscribe. Thank you for watching.